connecting to JMS queues. Let's now take our connection a step further with looking at how to interact with a message broker. JMS, or Java Messaging Service, is a widely used API for enabling applications to communicate through the exchange of messages. Oftentimes, it simplifies application development by providing a standard interface for creating, sending, and receiving messages. It supports two main messaging models. This is PTP, point-to-point, or topics, pub/sub, where you publish and have multiple subscribers. Queues, or point-to-point, are one-to-one. A sender produces that message to the queue, and a single receiver will consume the message off the queue. The receiver does not need to be listening to the queue at the time the message is sent. On topics, for an alternative, pub/sub, the idea is it can be one-to-many. A publisher sends a message to a topic, and all active subscribers of that topic receive the message. Subscribers that are not actively listening to a topic will miss unpublished messages. But there are some durability configurations that can be turned on to ensure that when a subscriber goes down, when it gets back up, it's able to grab all of those missing messages that it's subscribed to. The Mule JMS transport provides support for sending messages via JMS queues. The JMS connector is a generic connector for sending and receiving messages to JMS queues, potentially also topics. It can connect to any JMS messaging service that implements the JMS spec and will let you send and receive messages to both queues and topics. Now, what supported JMS providers are there? Well, out of the box, ActiveMQ and WebLogic JMS. Others are supported by a generic JMS or custom JMS configuration. You can think of this kind of similar to the database conversation we had with our database connector. Examples might be HornetMQ, OpenMQ, Solus JMS, Tibco EMS. Examples are in the documentation. And there's also some EE support for WebSphere MQ. Mule Enterprise has enhanced support for this transport. So let's get right into it. What we're going to try to do is use an external system that pushes out to a JMS topic. And inside of our Mule application, we're going to attempt to consume from that JMS topic to be able to see all of the things that we're subscribed to and get those messages as they come through. You'll get to see an ActiveMQ broker in Mule in action, use the JMS endpoint to retrieve the messages, and add those messages to the topic via the web. Let's get started in Studio. First things first in our project, let's make sure we're in our AP Essentials inside of the AP Essentials XML. We're going to start off by making a brand new flow, this time consuming off of JMS. In order to do this, we'll search in the side for JMS, and we'll drag that JMS connector into the canvas. Now, of course, dragging it into the canvas is going to create a JMS inbound connector endpoint. What we can essentially do here is rename our flow and then continue our configuration. So we will right-click on the brand new flow, and let's go ahead and call this one Get Topic Messages Flow. The idea here is this flow is going to be responsible for going in and acquiring messages that the JMS topic is subscribed to, or that the JMS endpoint is subscribed to from the topic, I should say. So we'll select the JMS endpoint here. And inside of this JMS properties view, let's go ahead and select the topic that we want to subscribe to. And let's go ahead and call this AP Essentials. Now you'll also notice that there is in fact a connector configuration here. We can go ahead and click Add inside of the connector configuration. This will pop up with some of the available connector configs we can use. In this case, the external broker we're going to be working with is ActiveMQ. So we'll select ActiveMQ. Once again, you'll want to look inside of your student file snippets to figure out the correct address for this resource. In my case, I'm going to be using localhost on port 61111, and I'll also use specification version 1.1, although either one should work fine. Go ahead and hit OK. And now we've got a brand new global connector that we're hooking into. Now, in order for this particular connector to work, it's very important that it has the appropriate jar files or libraries that it needs. So we'll have to once again go into our student files. Here I'm inside of the root of my student files. As a reminder, your directories could differ. Inside of the student files, I'll open up the jars, and here's that MySQL connector we brought in earlier. This time, I want to bring in the active MQ connector, 5.6.0. I'll drag in this connector, drop it into AP Essentials, and click Copy Files. What it's going to do is it's going to put this jar file into our project at the bottom. But what we also want to do is ensure it's part of our build path. So we'll right-click on the ActiveMQ all, go down to Build Path, Add to Build Path, and now we've got the ActiveMQ all inside of our build path. This way, when the application's packaged up, this jar file will be included, similar to our MySQL connector, and the Mule runtime will not need to provide that for our app. All right, taking this a step further now, let's go ahead and add a logger to the process section of this flow. And let's configure this logger to print out the payload. This way we can see the messages that are being pulled off of the topic. What we'll do next is we'll click inside of our canvas and save our project. Next, we're going to run this project in just normal mode. Once you can verify that your project has started up, hop into a web browser. Here inside of my web browser, I'm going to now go to a form site. So something that's linked in your student resources again. In my case, I'm going to be going out to localhost 8112, and I will be heading out to JMS. Now, once you go to your student files and look in the snippets and get this URL, you'll open up this link and you'll be able to see how you can easily send to a JMS topic. So what this is basically going to do behind the scenes is it's going to send this off to an instance of ActiveMQ. So essentially, if I just quickly preview that for you as well, there's a instance of ActiveMQ that's running and has the ability to accept queues and topics. This form is going to publish on to that particular topic. So in this case, I'm going to go ahead and put in the name of Max and say, hey, what's going on tonight? And send that off to the topic. And then I'll also put in a message from Sally, who will say not a whole lot. So as you can tell, a very riveting, exciting conversation. But essentially, we've sent two messages onto this topic, and our Mule app should now be pulling off. So let's flip back inside of Studio. Back inside of Studio, you're going to see that it says org message processor, logger message processor, hey, what's going on tonight? This is coming in from Max. And then subsequently to that, you can see the request that says logger message processor, not a whole lot. And this is our message in this case from Sally. Easy enough. So let's go ahead and take this a step further as well. What we'll go ahead and do is we will put a breakpoint inside of this app. So we'll toggle a breakpoint here right on the logger. And let's go ahead and run this application in debug mode. So we'll click our debug icon up in the top left, go down to Mule application and hit OK. And then yes. All right. Once we're inside of debug mode and it seems to be running okay, we'll go back to our web browser and let's continue this conversation. So Max comes back and says, well, that sounds boring, and we'll hit send. The message was sent on to the JMS broker, and back inside of Studio, we can see that the message has stopped on this logger. So we can see once the JMS inbound endpoint got that message off of the topic it was subscribed to, the payload here says, well, that's boring, and it's just a Java string that was on the broker. If we scroll through, we can actually see a lot of the different JMS headers that came in regarding correlation IDs, priority, all of that good stuff. If you look closely as well, there's also an attribute that came in as a header from JMS called name. So let's go ahead and use this name in our logger just to make this little pseudo application a little bit more functional. So we'll go ahead and stop our application, go inside of the logger, and this time we'll make a little bit of a fancier string. We'll go ahead and at the beginning say message dot inbound properties dot name, and then after name we'll go ahead and concatenate on a little colon here just so it's easy to discern the name from the actual message, and then put another plus sign in again. So in short, we should be able to read the chat as Max saying something, Sally saying something back to Max, and so on. Again, the point here being us looking out to a JMS topic and constantly receiving messages due to the fact that we're subscribed to it. So to achieve this one more time, let's click inside of our canvas. Let's go ahead and save our project up and run it in normal mode one more time. Once your application starts up completely, let's flip back into our web browser. Once back in our web browser, let's go ahead and say from Sally, what's new with you, Max? And we'll hit OK. Then we'll go back and from Max, send one more message out to this JMS topic that says something like, just hanging with the Baron. And we'll hit send, and that message will go on to our topic as well. Flipping back into Studio one more time, we'll be able to see that Sally said, what's new with you, Max? And then Max responded, just hanging with the Baron. All right, so we've now been able to easily consume messages from a JMS topic by using this JMS endpoint. But let's look a little bit deeper into this. What if we instead want to not only be able to consume from a message broker, but also be able to send messages off to the message broker? Instead of using this form, basically, this web-based form, can Mule itself produce to the topic? And that's what we're going to try doing next. So to achieve this, let's expose a brand new flow on HTTP. Let's call this new flow post topic message flow and click inside of the canvas. We'll go ahead and select our HTTP endpoint here. And what we'll go ahead and do is choose our pre-existing HTTP listener. We'll expose this one on JMS. And in this case, we're essentially going to be doing a GET request inbound to the HTTP endpoint. Now, we'll drag in another JMS endpoint into our flow. By dropping this one in the process phase, we are of course going to be working with an outbound endpoint, which should push a message onto the JMS topic. So what we can do in this case is we can select topic. Once again, choose AP Essentials. And we can use our pre-existing connector configuration, which was labeled ActiveMQ. Now, let's also make sure there's some type of payload that actually goes out and writes this message to the queue. So what we'll do here is let's go ahead and drag in a set payload transformer in between HTTP and JMS. Let's configure this set payload transformer to ask for the message dot inbound properties. We'll ask for the inbound properties query params, HTTP query params. And then we'll also grab the message from here. So whatever the query param value is for message, that's what we're going to use. On top of this, we want to make sure that we can add some metadata that will basically be sent off to the JMS broker, but will basically be header information rather than the body. Well, if you think about our conversation earlier about properties and variables, the great candidate for this would be introducing an outbound property so that the payload stays as is, but we write some metadata to cross the transport boundary. So I'm going to go ahead and type in property here and bring the property transformer in between setPayload. We'll set the property. And essentially, the property that we want to set is going to be the name of this person. Let's keep this one simple. So we'll call it name. And let's go ahead and put in a value here of Max. We'll also rename these two elements to make them clear. So this will say set name, and this will say set message. All right, looking good. So whenever we trigger this HTTP element on JMS, the message will be set based on the query parameter message. The name will be set to Max, and potentially we'll be producing to a JMS topic. On top of this guy should still be consuming those messages that are coming in. Let's see if it works. So I'll click inside of the canvas, save my project, and watch as Mule redeploys. Once the redeployment is successful, let's open up a web browser. I'll use Postman this time to show off the request. So we'll want to go out to our local host 8081/JMS where we exposed our endpoint. Remember that we also want to include a query parameter called message. So I'll say that message equals, hey there, I'm Max, and hit send. The message comes through, and we get a response back that says, hey there, I'm Max. This doesn't really tell us much, being most of those operations being kind of one way and not really doing anything to the message necessarily. We would sort of expect this to come back, although we can verify that the payload was in fact, hey there, I'm Max. And if we go into headers, we can also verify that a property was set for Max. So from an HTTP context, things seem to be working in our flow. Now let's go back one more time into Studio. Inside of Studio, at the bottom, you'll also notice that we've produced to the queue, and inside of here, we can see, hey there, I'm Max. Looks pretty good. So now we're able to push off to that topic. We're also able to consume from that topic. And that's how you can quickly and easily work with an external broker using Anypoint Studio and your Mule applications.